Alright guys, and welcome to episode 1 of my C# tutorial. So today we're going to look at some of the basics here. So first off we're going to talk about how you're going to actually write the code, where you're actually going to do that at. So it is possible to go ahead and just use Notepad and type out the code and then compile it with the command line compiler tool. However, we're not going to use that because there's a lot of benefits that you lose out on doing it that way. So what we're actually going to use is a free tool from Microsoft called Visual Studio Express, which is an integrated development environment. So you can just go to Google and search for Visual Studio Express, and it'll take you here to Microsoft's website. So once you land on this page, if you kind of look down here, you'll see Express Editions. You're going to want for the examples I'm going to use here, we're going to want Express for desktop. So this is for creating typical desktop applications. You may be seeing this Express for Windows, think you should get that. That's actually for the universal apps, the ones that'll work on like Windows 10, Windows RT, Windows Mobile, on all the other platforms. So we want Express for desktop. So just click download here. And you should see this pop up here. And go ahead and download. So you click on that. If you can see that, you get that little downloader there. And once that's complete, you'll get the security warning. So just go ahead and click run on that. Blow this up a little bit so you guys can see it. So once you get that done downloading, it'll come up here and prompt you. Just accept the default path, that's fine. You can tell it to install. You'll get the pop-up, the user access control. Just say yes to that. And this will actually take a while, so I'll just pause the video for now and we'll come back once this is done with the installation. Alright guys, so once you get Visual Studio Express installed, this is what you'll see when you launch it for the first time. So every time you launch it, you'll get this Start Page tab that populates. So this gives you just kind of almost like a blog setting of here's a bunch of different news items for Visual Studio. You can go and filter it out by these topic items here. You have your Solution Explorer, which will make more sense here in just a moment. And you have a quick start menu here for a new project, open from source code. You can also start a new project by going to File, selecting New Project. We won't get into too many of these other options just yet. So I just want to give you guys kind of a quick jump in look at C# and Visual Studio Express. Also guys, you can attach this to a Microsoft Live account. Again, we're not going to worry too much about that right now. So let's go ahead and go over here to start a new project. So you'll see this pop up here, dialog box that gives you some options: C#, Visual Basic, C++. We're going to stick with C#. And we're going to do a Windows Form application. So we can go right here and change the name. My first app. Seems like a pretty good name. Sorry if I'm a little sniffly here, guys. A little under the weather, but I wanted to go ahead and get this video put together for you. So hopefully some of you guys will find this pretty useful. So once you click on the new Windows Form application, you'll get this Windows Form 1 pop up here. Your Solution Explorer, which just has the application and all the different items that fall up under your application here. So let's go ahead and double click form1.cs and get back to the form. You see properties window down here. So this gives you all the different properties associated with whichever object you have focus on in the main pane here. So if you scroll down through this, you'll see we can change the text. So let's do my first application. You see once you press enter, you will see up here the title bar changes to my first application. So the text there affects what is the visible text in the application. So you can also go down here to design and change the name. So this would be actually the name of how Visual Studio identifies this particular form. Um, so what we can do is we can come in here and we can rename this main, for instance. For instance, if we wanted to do that, and then that way, if you have multiple windows to your application, so you can give each one of them a unique name that actually makes sense to you. So when you go back and have to reference it in the code later on, it's easy to remember. Or if you have to go back in and make changes to your code, 3 months, 6 months, 8 months after you've written it, it's a little, it makes more sense when you look at it. Um, you just kind of want to try and make things as intuitive as possible when you're creating your objects. Make your life a lot easier when it comes down to actually doing the coding. So you can also do stuff like change the size here in pixels. You can also just grab any of these little handles here and you can just resize it however you want from right here. Uh, so, like I said, there's a ton of different options through here. We'll get into some of this stuff more later on. One of the things I want to point out too, you can also set an icon. So if you want to go and create your own custom icon, you can store you can store it somewhere on your file system. It has to be an ICO file though. Maybe in another video I'll get into how to actually create your own ICO file to create your own custom icons. We'll do that in a later tutorial. So let's see. I think that's basically what I want to cover on that for now. So let's go ahead and go over here and look at the toolbox and look at how we're going to actually add components to this. So you see you can just drop down and do all Windows forms and I'll just give you all the different objects that are available to you. You can do common controls, so you see some of the most common ones. You can also go up in the search box. So let's say we want to put a label. So we can just grab this label object here, left click and drag, and you can drop it wherever you want. You can move it wherever you need to. You'll see you'll get these little like grid lines that kind of show you kind of a reference point of where you're placing it. And let's go ahead and grab a text box, right? So if we go ahead and do that, you can also press enter on them and that'll bring them in. But you'll see you actually get this uh, that line that pops up on the screen so you can make sure that everything's all nice and aligned. That way all your controls are neat looking. It looks more professional this way. So let's go ahead and add, let's go back to the toolbox. Let's add a button. Alright, so we'll add a button and whoops. You see there I accidentally double clicked on the button, which brings me to a good point. Once you double click on an object in here, it'll go ahead and bring you over to your actual C# code and it'll add in the function for the button click for that code for you. Alright, so let's go ahead and go in here before we go any further and rename some of these. So labels, I generally don't worry too much, so we'll change the text of this real quick. So let's say we're going to make this a super simple application. Let's see, what is your name? Question mark, press enter. And so that'll populate up here. And let's go down. Um, I generally don't worry too much about labels in super simple applications, to be perfectly honest, but it's a good idea just to get in the habit of naming everything. So generally, the convention would be to give it a or not 3-digit, I'm sorry, 3-character of what the actual control is. So in this case, LBL for a label, TXT for a text box, BTN for a button. Especially like text box and buttons, you definitely want to make sure you name them um, in a way that's going to make sense. That's going to be intuitive to what they are and what they do. So this one, we're just going to say label question. We'll call it that. So press enter, and then we'll go to this text box. And so see what we'll do here is we'll call it text name. And another convention that you want to make sure you follow when you're writing in any language is camel, what they call camel case. So you see here how the first three letters, which is the first part of the word, so the first word, I'm sorry, the first word of the name. So there's two words to the name of the control, and so what I'm going to do is call it txt all lowercase, and then the next word I'll capital the first letter, so capital N in name. So if it was going to be a different box for first and last name, we would do first, oops, I'm not very good at typing, first name like that with a capital F, capital N. So let's see, you want to stick with camel case, helps make things easy to read, because you cannot have spaces in any of these names. So you can do things in here, like for a text box, for instance, you can also go in here and say limit it by, or limit it to, say, a certain number of characters. You can do password characters, so you can go in here and say put an asterisk in here. And so what happened is, let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and run the application. So when you're ready to test your application, you come up here and hit this start. I'm sorry if I'm going a little fast, guys. I kind of get excited about this stuff, and it gets me pumped, and I kind of start running off my wheels here. Um, so if you click this start button, this takes you into debug mode, and so you'll actually get your actual application up and running, so you can test your code, debug it before you actually build the final application. So if you'll see, as I type in, you don't see the actual characters. All you see is the asterisk. That's helpful if you want to make like a login page. We'll actually do that in one of the tutorials. Probably the third or fourth one, we'll make an actual login page where we'll utilize something like that. But for now, make sure you clear that out, press enter, and so when you run it now, you should see whatever um, name you type in there. It should come in just fine. So let's close that out. And let's go down here and change the text on this to process. We'll just make it something silly. So go down here, we want to make sure we name our button appropriately. So we'll do btn proc just to keep it nice and short. You also want to, without hindering the actual intuitiveness, without making these names not make any sense, abbreviate as much as possible, because the less characters in all these different names, and less characters you put in your variable names, the shorter you can keep the names of things, the better for you in the long run. But you definitely don't want to do it to the point to where you kind of screw yourself over and make it so that your code's completely illegible and makes no sense. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's line this up a little better. Let's go ahead and actually do a little bit more. Whoops. See, there I go again. Alright, so you see that automatically does it as a text changed. Actually, I like it better over here, I think. But what I was trying to say just a moment ago, let me do this one more time. I don't like having these things be too large. So whenever I double click on that text box, you'll see text or text name underscore text changed is the actual action that. So if you put whatever code you put in here would happen whenever the text changed in the text box, and whatever code you put in here on button one click, which we'll have to change that because it's not button one anymore. We'll have to rename this to, let's go right here, btn. What do we call that? Proc is what you're going to want that to be called. Whoops. See, I went and screwed that up. There we go. But so click is the action that'll cause this code to run. Like I said, we're not going to dive too heavily into this stuff. I just want to kind of get you guys familiar with what we've got going on in here and familiar with what everything does. And oh no, what did I do? Oh, so in case you guys ever encounter that, I think that hopefully should fix it. Yeah, there we go. So sometimes whenever you do things like that where you accidentally double click on an object and it populates in here and gives it the private void, It gives you basically a function of what's going to happen whenever code runs. That got named as button 1, but then we later renamed it to btn proc. So what happens is in the background in Designer, this is all the kind of in the background, the code on the form that makes everything work. Uh, since C Sharp's a managed language, a lot of the stuff you don't have to do is other languages that aren't managed languages. You would actually have to do all this coding out manually. Like if you're doing something like I believe something like Swift actually. So Swift is Apple's language for doing iOS development. And I believe Objective-C would be the same way as well, where you would have to do something like this in the background. You'd have to manually key all this in to actually generate a functioning button. But since C Sharp is a managed language, this actually is all built out for us. So actually makes our lives a lot easier, and that's why we love C Sharp. Um, so let's kind of get back to it. I know I keep getting derailed, getting off topic here. Let's see. So we added in our objects. Let's go ahead and just look at. We've kind of shown you guys the interface for the actually entering in your C sharp, the actual the area where the development takes place. So something I want to cover before we talk about actually putting any code in anywhere. Something important to know is if you hit backslash backslash, see how that text turned green there? This is how you comment your code. So this is very important. As you are developing applications and as you're putting your code in, you want to make sure that you are commenting your code. Early on when you're doing simple little apps like this one's going to be super simple, super obvious what it does. Doesn't take a whole lot of, scratching your head to figure out what's going on. Um, you you want to make sure you comment your code, especially whenever your applications start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The bigger they get, the harder it is to tell what's going on. So by commenting your code, you don't only help yourself out, but especially if you're working on a team with multiple people, or you're doing this as for a living, doing this as a job. Um, you want to comment your code so that if someone else has to come in behind you and look at it and do some work to it later on, or if you have to come back to it a year later, you're not going to remember what you did, why you did it, how you did it. So putting in these comments are going to make your life a lot easier if you ever have to come back and look at this code again. So it's just a good way to put some documentation into your code so you know what's going on in the back end when you have to come back in and work on the code again later. Um, so basically, anytime you do backslash backslash and get that green text there, that's non-executable characters. These are not going to be executed whenever the application runs. So let's go ahead and have this do something. Well, let's look at what we've done so far. So we've created this form. We've given this a prompt. So right now we're prompting the user for information. What is your name? It's going to ask you to I did it again. I keep double clicking. It's going to ask you to go ahead and put your name in this text box, right? So let's see what happens right now. We'll put it in. We'll put in my name is Johnny. Process. Well, when you click process, nothing happens because we don't have any code in there yet. Um, and because I'm a little OCD, let's go in here real quick. Where is it at? Text align. Here we go. So if you come up here, you can change your text align under appearance to be right justified. By the way, when you click on it, you can just scroll through the list, or you can hit the drop down and actually select it. So now by doing that, whenever we type into it, because the way we kind of have everything lined up, I keep missing that shift key. The way everything's lined up, it just kind of looks a little cleaner whenever we run it like that. So anyways, so right now it doesn't do anything. So let's go ahead and double click on process. Alright guys, so what I want to do next is go and talk about variables real quick. So variables are a location in the system memory where you're going to store data temporarily. So the data will be there unless you do something in your code to change it. That data will be stored in that variable until the application closes, so you can reuse it as many times as you need to throughout your application. So um, they become extremely handy, especially in larger applications. In this case, something this small, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's not gonna, um, seem super helpful, but once we start getting into building out the inventory application that we're going to get into in the next couple of videos, you'll start to see how having those variables there is essential. We'd be completely lost without it. So in order to use the variable or to use a variable, what you need to do is declare the variable. So um, you have to tell the system that we're going to name it, my variable, and anytime we need this data, I'm going to say my variable in the code, and the system's going to know, okay, that's reference to this memory address in system memory. It's going to pull that data out for us. So what I want to go ahead and do is we're going to go up here to public and declare the variables up here in the public class, so that way it'll be available throughout our application here. So when you declare a variable, first thing you have to do is declare the data type. So you have to tell the system what kind of data you're going to store. You have to tell C# what kind of data you're going to store in this variable. Since we're going to store a name, we want to store a string of text. So the data type, not capital, you want to do lowercase string space user name is what we're going to call it. Now each line of code that you put in to C# has to be ended somehow. You have to tell C# that there's an endpoint, because just pressing enter doesn't tell it anything. It doesn't care about the line breaks. What breaks a line of code is a semicolon. So a semicolon works like a period in the English language, where a period signifies the end of a sentence. A semicolon signifies the end of your statement in your code. So now we've got this string username declared. Let's go ahead and look at a couple of other data types real quick. So if we want to say store the user's age, that would be that would be a whole number that we want to store, a single whole number, and that would be an integer data type. So int user age. So you can see we want to stick with that camel case naming convention that I talked about whenever we were naming the objects. You want to stick with that with anything you have to name in your application. Like I said, it's going to help with the legibility. It's going to help things make sense to you when you have to go back and look at it later on down the road. So user age. Let's say we also wanted to store a true/false value. Yes or a no that we may need to use later. That would be a boolean, a 1 or a 0, true or false, yes, no, however you want to look at it. That'd be a boolean value that we'd want to store. So if we wanted to store a single character, for instance, we didn't need a whole string, we just need a single character, that'd be a char. Decimal, if we need to store a decimal, a number. If we're dealing with something like, say, money, where we only want the last two, or I'm sorry, we only want the first two digits after the decimal, that would be a double, which is, like I said, super helpful for like point of sale systems, inventory management systems where you're tracking price or cost or something like that. So we'll be using some of that in the inventory control app we build. So I kind of covered some of the basic data types. Like I said, there's dozens of data types that you can go through and use when you're declaring your variables to make sure that you're storing the proper data type on that. Sorry guys, you're going to notice a lot of cuts in this, a lot of jumps and edits in this, just because I'm sure you can tell by my voice. I'm feeling under the weather, coughing a lot, so I'm going to try and edit that out for you guys as much as possible. But trust me, I'm not going to, any mistakes or anything like that, I'm going to try and leave in here anything that will help you learn as we go along here. So let's go ahead and take this out because we're actually not going to use that variable, and it will not like having an unused variable. It'll just yell at us. It won't actually break anything. So what we want to do is go ahead and, so what is your name? We're going to input some data into this text box. We want to take that and store that data into this variable, this username variable here, and when we click on this process button, we want something to happen. So let's go ahead and go down here to the private void button proc underscore click. So whenever button proc is clicked, we're going to want it to do something. So we will go ahead and have, when we click on button proc, we want to have a message box pop up. So we need the message box class, and we're going to need the show method of the message box class. So anytime you have a method that you're trying to call, you're going to need an open close parentheses so we can feed it parameters. So we're going to do message box dot show, and then in this we're going to put an open close parenthesis, or I'm sorry, a open and close quote. And between this, we're going to put the text we want to show in the message box. This is going to be the literal text that'll show up whenever our message box is displayed. And then of course we need that semicolon at the end to end the line out. So let's go ahead and decide what we want it to say. Um, so let's come over here and we'll actually go ahead and have it take username plus, I will do space, we'll do comma space, or no, actually let's do question mark space. That is a cool name. Exclamation point. Alright, so if we go ahead and run this right now, right, so we click that play button, gives us our debug view. We can go ahead and type in my name. What is your name? Johnny, process. And then we get question mark, that's a cool name. Well, what happened? It didn't display our username. Well, we didn't tell it to use our username. So before we do that, you see we get this green squiggly here. Remember I mentioned earlier that if we declare a variable and don't use it, it's not gonna break anything, but it's gonna yell at us, say, hey, you've got a variable name that you've declared, but you haven't used it anywhere. Why not? So above this message box line, let's do username is equal to, now this equals to like this with one equal sign is an assignment, not a math function. So we're going to set username is equal to txtname dot text. So we've got txtname, our object. Oh, let's put our semicolon in so we get rid of that red squiggly. So we've got our username variable is going to be set equal to our object text name dot text, which is going to be the actual property of that text name. So now you should see this should go away. Oh, never. That's actually a. I probably should actually read this. Is never assigned to. It will always have its default value null. Okay. So with this, I think with this up here, I guess it was just hanging over. Sometimes if you don't when you declare your variable, sometimes you'll need to actually initialize it. So like if we did this, we could also do, when we declared this string variable, set it equals to, just open close quote, which is just tell it to set it to an empty string, and it would work like that too. So let's do a different name, let's do Bobby. Hit process. Bobby, that's a cool name. Um, so, super simple application. Um, Remember, like I said before, guys, I know I haven't been a great example of this already. I'm a terrible example. Comment all your code. So here we're going to do declare the username variable to store the user's name. And down here, we're going to just do whack whack so we can do our comment. And we just want to tell it, okay, I'm going to do whack whack to set our comment. And so for the first one, we're going to assign text box, txt name to user name variable. And this just displays a message box to user on button press. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit the save button here. Always make sure that you're saving regularly whenever you're working on something like this. Well, not something like this, but a real project. You want to make sure that you save regularly, because last thing you want to do is write 50, 60, 100 lines of code and have a system crash or something and just lose all of that work. Alright guys, so hopefully this gave you a good introduction to C Sharp and kind of what it's all about using the interface of Visual Studio Express. I don't want to have these videos be too long. Let me know in the comments below, if how long the video was, if it was too long, too short, if you think they could be a little bit longer. I know we didn't cover a whole lot of content in this one, but like I said, I want to kind of keep them into more bite-sized pieces, make them easier to ingest. Once I get these all rolled out, you guys can bang through them as quickly as you want to, and string 3, 4, 5 videos together if you need to. But I know me personally, whenever I'm learning something new, or I'm trying to watch through a video series. I've got 2 kids, I've got a full-time job. Uh, I've got a family to take care of. I don't have time, a lot of times I don't have 4 or 5 hours to sit down and watch a tutorial video on how to do something. So having like, 20, 30-minute bite-sized pieces to work with is, typically super helpful. I know this was a little disorganized, a little, all over the place. I'll try and kind of, get these down a little bit tighter in the next couple of videos. But let me guys, let me guys. Let me know what you thought, guys. Let me know, if the content was good, if everything was clear. If you have any questions, just shoot me a comment down below. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at TitoTechTV on Twitter. Go ahead and hit the subscribe, hit the like if you like the button. If you like the button, good lord. Go ahead and hit subscribe, hit the like button if you liked the video, hit dislike if you didn't like it. Like I said, leave me a comment down below. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if you have anything you want me to improve on, any suggestions you guys have for me. Next time, we're going to go ahead and get into actually creating our own functions. Sorry, I'm getting really stopped up, guys. Gonna go into create our own functions, creating if-then statements, case statements, loops, and kind of expanding what we can do with our application. So like I said, we'll keep building out this application, just as kind of an example of focusing on using the code, not necessarily what the actual function of the application is. And once we get through that, we'll actually start getting into linking up our application to a C# database and creating something little bit more useful. I think I just said C# database. I'm going to say SQL database. I'm not sure. I'm really tired. I'm really sick. But until next time, guys, thanks for watching. Like I said, make sure you hit that subscribe, hit that like button, leave me a comment down below, hit me up on Twitter at TitoTechTV. See you in the next video. Thanks, guys.